Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today is day 11 in our 90-day SAT preparation series. Today we're going to start with the SAT Math section. We're going to spend half an hour there, and then we're going to switch over to the SAT Reading section. So today for the SAT Math section, we're going to be doing the April of 2019 SAT from Maine that they released. So they released the test along with the answers. So I'll be taking you through questions 1 through 8 of the Math No Calculator section, and then questions 1 through 8 of the Math with Calculator section. So as I go through, I'll be giving you tips and tricks and strategies to put into your notebook, as well as the answer solutions that you can put in your workbook to get practice with the problems. So anything that I say should go in your notebook, just make sure to put in there so that way you can look through that before you take the SAT and before you take practice tests to help you improve your score. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the No Calculator section in question 1. So we have Juliet rented a car for 1 day from a company that charges $80 per day plus $0.15 per mile driven. If she was charged a total of $98 for the rental and mileage, how many miles of driving was Juliet charged? All right, well, her total is $98, and we know that that's equal to her $80 per day times the 1 day, which is just going to be that $80, plus that 0.15 miles that she drives times every mile she drives. So we'll do X as the miles she drives. So we're going to subtract 80 from each side, right? 98 minus 80 is going to give us 18. So now we have 18 equals 0.15x. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have to divide each side by 0.15. Right, so what you may be thinking when you see 18 over 0.15 is that that's going to be kind of difficult to do, right? You'd have to find how many times that 15 goes into that 1800. But what we can really do is we can actually figure this answer out pretty quickly because we see that 15 goes into 18 once. So we know our answer has to start with a 1, so we can get rid of C and D. And the next thing that we can do is we can just think off the top of our heads real quick. 15 times 15 cents isn't going to get us anywhere close to $18. So we know A has to be incorrect, and we know that B has to be our correct answer then. So that's one way that we can get to the correct answer very quickly. So what to put in your notes for that? I would just say making sure that we're getting rid of wrong answer choices as fast as we can. That's a really big theme across the SAT Math section and across people who score high on the SAT, is that they're able to get rid of wrong answer choices very quickly. So you saw I was able to get rid of this 533 and this 633 quickly, and then get rid of that 15 quickly as well. So just making sure that we're using getting wrong answer choices out of the way in order to find the right answer choice. All right, question 2. Which of the following polynomials is equivalent to the expression above? All right, well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look for terms that can help me get rid of answer choices. So just the simplest one is usually the first one, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So we've got 2x times, this is addition, so we have x squared. All right, we got x squared right here. There's no other x squared, so I know I have to have x squared, so I can get rid of c. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a term I can use to get rid of my remaining answer choices. I see that I have a 7 here and a 5 here and a 7 here, so I'll go ahead and see what our final term is going to be. I see I'm going to have a 6 plus positive 1. 6 plus positive 1 is going to be a 7, so I have to end with plus 7, so that means I can get rid of a. So now in between b and d, I see my difference is my x term, so I'm going to have 2x plus 2x, which is 4x. All right, so I'll have x squared plus 4x plus 7. So my answer there is going to be D. All right, moving on to question 3. As far as tips for number 2, once again, just making sure that we're getting rid of wrong answer choices as fast as we can. Other than that, it was just understanding how to add polynomials. Question 3, for the function f defined above, what is the value of f of 1? Well, when we're asked for the value of f of 1, that means we're just plugging in 1 for x. Right, so we take that out, put a 1 in, take x out, and put a 1 in. We see that 1 minus 1 is going to equal 0, and we know that 2 times 0 is equal to 0. And then we have to add a 2, which means our final answer is going to be 2. So our answer will be B. So as far as tips we can learn from question 3, really we just need to remember that if we're asked for the value of f of some number, that just means we're plugging that number in for x. So really this one's no tricks that we can use to save time on it. It's just understanding how to complete that problem. All right, question 4. Which of the following is an equation of the line in the xy plane that has a slope of 2 and passes through point 0.03? All right, right off the bat, when I see that slope of 2, I'm going to make sure that all my answer choices have 2x. I see that they do because I'm going to take this 2 and multiply it by x to get 2x. So I can't get rid of anything on that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in my points. So I know that I have 0 for x, right? So I'll have 2 times 0, and that's going to equal my y, which is 3. Well, 2 times 0 is 0. So if I need 3 to equal 0 plus a number, it's going to have to be plus 3. So I know that my y-intercept has to be a positive 3. I know my slope is going to be 2x. So I know that my equation will be y equals 2x plus 3, which is going to be answer choice A. So once again, on this one, we tried to get rid of wrong answer choices as quick as we could. We saw that we couldn't really do that with our slope only, so we had to find our y-intercept. And then once we found our y-intercept, we were able to get to our correct answer. One thing to note is that C is incorrect because this 2 gets multiplied by that 3 to get a plus 6, so that is why C is incorrect. Alright, so as far as tips for that one, just getting rid of wrong answer choices, substituting in our variable. Notice how I didn't go through and plug in 0 and 3 for each one of these a through d. Instead, what I did is I plugged it in with that 2x as its slope to solve for the y-intercept. If you were to plug in 0 and 3 for all a through d, you'd be wasting a lot of time. Instead, what we want to do, instead of plugging answer choices in for all a through d, is we want to use the information we're given to go ahead and find the answer that way. So that's something you can put in your notes if you want to. Alright, so which of the following is the solution to the equation above? Well, anytime I have a square root, I mean I want to isolate it on one side and then square it to get rid of it. So if I'm going to isolate it on one side, I'm going to subtract 4 from each side. That's going to give me 12 minus 4, which I know is 8. So now I have 8 is equal to the square root of x. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and square each side. I know 8 squared is 64, so now I have 64 is equal to x. So my answer there will be C. So as far as tricks for these, with square root questions, when we have a variable underneath a square root, as we do here, what we want to do is we want to get that square root isolated. So we want to remove this plus 4. We want to move it to this other side by subtracting it. And then what we can do is we can square that square root to get rid of it. That way we can get just x and not have to deal with that square root being over it. So if you want to put that in your notes, you can. All right, question 6. All right, so we have an equation. If 7 times 2x minus 5 minus 2 times the quantity 2x minus 5 equals 4 times the quantity x plus 5, what is the value of x? So once again, we want to make sure we pay attention to what we have to answer with. In this case, it's just whatever x is. All right, so what I'd be looking for is to see if there's anything I could do with this 2x minus 5, but there really isn't because on this side, I don't have that 2x minus 5. So there's no canceling I can do there. Also, it's subtraction, it's not multiplication, so there wouldn't be really any canceling I could do there either. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm just going to have to take that 7, distribute it to my 2x and to my negative 5. 7 times 2x is going to give me 14x, and then 7 times negative 5 is going to give me negative 35. Next, I have a negative 2 times 2x, that's going to give me minus 4x, and then I have a negative 2 times a negative 5, which gives me positive 10. So when I simplify this down, my 14x and my negative 4x will make 10x because 14x minus 4x is 10x. My negative 35 plus 10 brings me to negative 25, and that will equal 4 times x, which is 4x, and then plus 4 times 5, which is plus 20. Now I just get all of my x's onto one side. Keep in mind I'm subtracting 4x to keep my coefficient in front of x positive because that just makes the problems much easier. If our coefficient in front of x is positive, it prevents us from making unnecessary mistakes. Then I have to add my 25 to each side to get all my constants on one side. We know that 20 plus 25 is going to give us 45. So we now have 6x equals 45. We're going to go ahead and divide each side by 6 to isolate x. We know that 45 over 6, we're going to check our answer choices. We see that it isn't there, which means we're going to have to simplify. All right, so what am I going to look to simplify to? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at my answer choices, and I see I have a 15 over 2, right? And that makes sense because each of these, you can put a 3 in 6, and you can put a 3 in 45. So 45 over 3 gives us 15, and 6 over 3 gives us 2, which means our answer will be 15 over 2. All right, so when we have to simplify, we're going to want to look for what our common denominator is, or what could be factored into each. What's our common factor? So in 6, a factor is 3, and in 45, a factor is also 3. So we're going to want to make sure that we are dividing 45 by 3 and then 6 by 3 to get that 15 over 2. So don't freak out if you don't see that the answer you come up with is in A through D. Just make sure you go back and simplify because likely your answer is correct. You just need to simplify. So if you want to put that in your notes, that can be helpful because I find that a lot of students sometimes will just freak out if they don't see the answer they got, but you just need to maintain your composure and then simplify down, and that will usually get you the correct answer. All right, question 7. Which of the following is equivalent to the expression above? All right, so one thing that jumps out to me right away is that I have no x cubed terms and I have no x terms. I just have x squared and x to the 4th, and then I have a positive 16 here. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look to get rid of as many answer choices as I can based on this positive 16. So I'm going to look at what I would end with in my constant variable, right? So no x next to it in A through D. See if I can get rid of as many equations as I can right there. So I see right here, I'm going to have, we'll start with D. We have -4 to the fourth. Well, I know that just off the bat, -4 times -4, that's going to give me positive 16. And then I have to go ahead and multiply that by -4. And at that point, I'm getting a greater absolute value than 16. So I can get rid of D. The next thing that I know is I know that -2 to the fourth power, right? That's the same as 2 to the fourth power because it's 2 an even power, so it'll be positive anyways. And I know that that will get me 16, so C is still in it. I know that in B, I have a 4 times a 2, that gives me 8. 8 times -2, that would give me -16, so I can get rid of B. And then I'm between A and C. So how do I know that A will be the correct answer? Well, I know that C can't be the correct answer because if I was to do x minus 2 to the fourth, then I would likely, I believe I would end up with a x cubed term and an x term. Why? And I would end up with an x cubed term and an x term. And the reason that I would end up with that is because if we look at this, if I was to do x minus 2, x minus 2, x minus 2, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a minus 2x right here, and then I'm going to have to go ahead and multiply that by an x, right? I multiply this minus 2x then by my next x minus 2. That's going to give me minus 2x squared. And then when I multiply that by that x minus 2 again, you see that I end with a minus 2x cubed. So we see that we end with an x cubed that way. The way that we can cancel those x cubed and those x terms is with this right here, having 1b minus 2 and 1b positive 2. That means our x cubed terms are going to cancel and our x terms are going to cancel. Therefore, we know that A is going to have to be our correct answer. Okay, next thing we've got is, as far as notes for number 7, just making sure we understand that we can use these minus 2's and these plus 2's to cancel the x cubed term and the x term. So that can be something important to know, and I would recommend putting that down in your notes. I would recommend actually probably putting this exact problem in your notes. Just note down x to the power of fourth minus 8x squared plus 16 is equal to x minus 2 squared times x plus 2 squared. Just that way you can see that pattern and you can recognize the pattern of this x minus 2 squared and this x plus 2 squared canceling out their x cubed terms and their x terms and just leaving in an x to the fourth and an x squared term and then a constant. So I'd recommend putting that in your notes, and with that we're going to move on to question 8. Alright, question 8 is right here. The formula above relates volume, mass, and density. What is the density in terms of volume and mass? Alright, well, all we got to do here is get density alone and set it equal to the other variables. So we're going to multiply by the density to each side. And we do that, and then we're going to multiply by the volume to each side. Now we see that D then is going to equal our mass over our volume, which is answer choice B. So we know that the correct answer to 8 is B. As far as tips for this one, I told you that you should probably put down that volume equals mass over that density equals mass over volume equation in your notes. And if you did that and you memorized it, then you would automatically know that B is correct anyways. But if not, just understanding that we can derive the equation just by canceling terms out. So that is something you can put in your notes if you didn't already have it. You probably did from yesterday, but this one's pretty simple. So we can go ahead and move on to the math with calculator section now. All right, let's get started with the math with calculator section. So once again, anything I say that should go in your notebook, try to put it in there. Everything else can just go in the workbook. All right, so we've got an equation set up top, and we're asked what value of x satisfies the equation above. So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of my x terms on one side, set it equal to the constants, and then solve for x because I'm asked for the value of x. And that's going to be the quickest way to do it. So we've got that 5 times x, that gives us 5x, and then 5 times -3, that's going to give us minus 15. We set that equal to our 10x plus 5. Then we're going to subtract 5x from each side. Notice how I'm always subtracting that smaller x value in order to keep my x positive, or my coefficient in front of x positive, right? That way I don't have to deal with negatives in front of my x. So now I have 5x equals, I subtract 5 from each side. Negative 15 minus 5 gives me negative 20. I divide each side by 5. Negative 20 over 5 gives us negative 4. So we know that x will equal negative 4. Once again, making sure we pay attention to what our question is asking, because sometimes it'll ask for what the value of 2x plus 3 is equal to, or something like that. All right, so there we go. That's going to be our answer for number 1. As far as tips for that one, just making sure that we're not wasting time with the early questions. A lot of times the earlier questions on the SAT will be easier, and that's part of your pacing strategy, which I'll get into in later lessons, but understanding we want to move fairly quickly on these earlier questions because they get more difficult as we go on. So that could go in your notes if you would like. Question 2. A student walks X kilometers along a straight path from point P to Q. I'm going to plot the path as I read through the problem. Then the student walks Y kilometers along a straight path from point Q to point R. What is the total distance X plus Y in kilometers that the student walks? All right, well, our total distance that we walk, we see that we walk 4 blocks this way, and then we walk 7 blocks up. So our total number of blocks that we walk is 11. But we know that each block is only 1/2 of a kilometer, because we see that 1 kilometer is 2 blocks, right? So we have 11 blocks times 1 kilometer per 2 blocks. We see that our blocks are going to cancel, and we'll be left with 11 over 2, which is equal to 5.5 kilometers. So once again there, I talked about this in yesterday's lessons, but using units to cancel out to make sure we're getting to our correct answer. That's another strategy you can use, and that's another thing you can put in your notes, because we see our blocks cancel here, and we're left with kilometers. All right, another thing, some people would just go ahead and plot that path, and they would just think that they automatically are supposed to solve for this hypotenuse here. That's incorrect. Make sure we're paying attention to that end question and what we're asked. Notice how I underlined that we're asked for the total distance X plus Y, right? This being X and this being Y. We weren't asked for that hypotenuse there. We were asked for the total distance. So always making sure we're paying attention to what the end question is asking. Okay, question 3. If y is equal to x plus 1/2 and z is equal to 2x minus 3, which of the following is equivalent to y plus y times z? All right, well, what we have to do here is we have to substitute in our equations for y and then y times z. So we know that y is going to equal that x plus 1/2, and then we have plus y times z. So one thing that I'm going to look for right away is how I can get rid of wrong answer choices. I recognize that my last term and all of these answer choices are different. So I'm only going to worry about solving for my last term, right? So if I look at this then, I have a positive 1/2. That's going to be y. So I know I have 1/2 because I get to ignore my x term, because as long as I can solve for this last term, I can get the correct answer. Then I have to add that to y times z. Keep in mind, I only have to worry about these constants again. So that's going to be that 1/2 times this negative 3. So that's minus 3 times 1/2, right? Now what's that going to get me? Well, negative 3 times 1/2 is negative 3 over 2. Then we add 1/2 to that, and we see that we're going to end with negative 1. So now we know that our answer is A, and we didn't have to deal with this, or this, right? So that's going to be the quickest way we can get to our answer choice. So once again, just making sure we understand how to eliminate wrong answer choices faster in order to get to the correct answer faster. All right, question 4. An electric company charges Jerome 5 cents per kilowatt hour of energy he uses in his house. If Jerome was charged $36 by the electric company, how many kilowatt hours of energy did Jerome use? All right, well, he's charged a total of $36, and we know that he is charged 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So I'll represent that as K. So what we have to do here then is we have to divide each side by 0.05 in order to isolate K and solve for the number of kilowatt hours he used. Now when we do this, we plug this into our calculator, and we will get that the answer is D, 720 kilowatt hours. So our answer there will be D. So as far as things that could go in your notebook for this question, I would just make sure that we understand that we need to underline things like anything with numbers and word problems needs to be underlined. Understanding rates, right? So we have a rate that he is charged of 5 cents per kilowatt hour, setting that equal to our total cost, and then solving for our variable. So this one is kind of a self-explanatory question, or at least it's not super difficult or complex, and there's really no tricks we can use to really solve that one any quicker than we can. All right, number 5. A scientist conducted an experiment and selected a random sample of runners from a list of all high school track participants from a certain city. The scientists randomly assigned, so keep in mind now, we've got a random sample and we have random assignment. Those are two important parts of having a good data from which we can draw statistically significant results. All right, so we have a random sample of runners from a list of all high school track participants from a certain city. We randomly assign each runner to one of 2 treatment groups, and the results of the experiment were found to be statistically significant. Statistically significant means that their results are accurate, right? They're accurate and they show a trend. So to which of the following populations can the results of the experiment be safely generalized? Well, we can only generalize the results of our experiment to our population that we extracted our sample from. Now we extracted our sample from runners from a high school, or runners from a list of all high school track participants in a certain city. So that's all that we can apply this results to. We can't apply it to all high school athletes because we only took the sample from a certain city. B, all high school track participants from the city. Yes, because we conducted this random sample of all high school track participants from that city. So B will be our correct answer. D, all runners is incorrect because we only conducted them from high school as well as only from one city. So that would be incorrect. And then C, all high school track participants from the country. Once again, we only took them from a city, so we can't apply it to the whole country. So our answer there is going to be B. So as far as notes for this one, I would put this in your notes. I'm going to give you a direct quote on this one because I think it's important that we're very accurate with what we say here. So what I would put in your notes is that the results of a survey, study, or experiment can only be applied to the same group of people from which the random sample was taken. So I think you need to put that quote in your notes so that way you understand that we are making sure that we're only applying the results of a survey to the sample that it was taken from, because we can't apply it if there weren't people involved in the sample. For example, in this case, we can't apply it to all runners or all of them from the country because we're only taking the sample from one city and from high school track participants. So understanding we can't apply data generally, it has to be specific to the sample from which it was taken. All right, question 6. Which of the following equivalent forms of the function f of x equals 4x squared plus 4x minus 24 is the most suitable to indicate the x-coordinates of the x-intercepts of the graph y equals f of x in the xy plane? All right, well, if we have to show x-intercepts, what that means is that we're setting our equation to 0 and we're solving for our roots, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to set the equation that we were given equal to 0, and now we're going to factor it. All right, so the first thing I see is I'm going to look to factor out this 4. I see that 4 is a common factor in 4x squared, in 4x, and in minus 24. So I'm going to factor out 4, and that's going to leave me with x squared plus x minus 6. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor that out. So I know that that is going to give me an x on each side. And then I also know that this negative 6, I need factors of it where one is one number bigger than the other. So I know that that's going to give me a plus 3 and a minus 2. So now I know that my equation, where I show my x-intercepts, is going to be f of x equals 4 times x plus 3 times x minus 2, which will be answer choice B. So the correct answer for 6 is going to be B. So once again, something to put in your notes here, and I would recommend putting this in your notes, is that when you're asked to show the x-intercepts of an equation, making sure that we're showing it in this form here with this all the way factored out. We can't leave it right here because that's not showing our x-intercepts. We have to factor it all the way out to this part right here. The other thing you should put in your notes is that in order to do that, if there's a common factor such as 4 in this case, we want to factor that out first before we go into factoring this right here. So I would make sure that you put that in your notes if you have not already, which I don't believe that we have yet. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that as I move up to number 7. Okay, number 7. Raymond's weekly income consists of a base salary for a 40-hour work week plus overtime pay. The overtime pay is paid at an hourly rate for the time Raymond works in addition to his 40-hour work week. Raymond's weekly income in dollars can be represented by the expression 800 plus 30x, where x is the total number of hours Raymond works over 40 hours. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the number 800 in this context? So once again, it's a word problem. So if you look at what I underlined, I was underlining rates, any numbers, and any details about what an expression represents, as well as what I need to answer with. For example, in this case, the interpretation of the number 800 in this context. Well, if we look at our expression for his weekly income, we see 800 is a constant that is unaffected by x, x being how much he works overtime. So we know 800 has to be his base weekly salary in dollars, because if he gets 0 overtime, he's still getting that $800, right? If x is 0 in our equation for 800 plus 30x, he still receives his $800 as his base weekly salary. We know B is incorrect because it says his total overtime pay, and if x is 0, 800 is uninvolved with his overtime, period, because it doesn't involve x. C, the total number of hours in a year that Raymond works in addition to his normal 40-hour work weeks, that is incorrect because once again, that 800, it is even touching the x, right? We're not multiplying it by x at all, so that is not going to be our correct answer there. And then D, Raymond's hourly wage in dollars per hour for time worked in addition to his normal 40-hour work week, that's what that 30 would be. So we can get rid of D as well. So as far as notes for number 7, really just once again, if you didn't pay attention to what I was saying in a couple of videos ago where I was saying what you need to underline in word problems, you should probably go back and rewatch that. I can give you a quick summary now. What I recommend underlining in word problems is going to be any units of time, any units of measurement, any rates, any numbers, and any expressions and what they represent, as well as what the final question is. So what you have to answer with, in this case, the interpretation of the number 800. Okay, question 8. A city with 120,000 residents is voting on a proposal that would eliminate overnight parking of vehicles on the city streets. An independent company randomly surveys 1,200 residents to see whether or not the residents would support the proposal. The outcome of the survey shows that 60% of the residents surveyed approve of the proposal with a margin of error of 2%. Which of the following statements is a plausible conclusion from the outcome of the survey? All right, so we're asked for which statement is a plausible conclusion from the outcome of the survey. All right, well, if we look at the survey, we know it was randomly surveyed from residents of the city, right? We know that the margin of error is 2%, and we know that it showed that 60% of those surveyed approve with a margin of error of 2%. So margin of error, you need to put this in your notes. We did not cover this yet. I'm going to write it on this left side here. Margin of error. Okay, put this in your notebook. Okay. Margin of error works both ways. So in this case, we had 60% of those approve of the proposal. Well, that means that in reality, since the margin of error is 2%, it's going to be 62% to 58%. That's how many people could approve of the proposal in the city since our margin of error is 2%. So we're going to take plus or minus whatever our margin of error is, and apply it to our data, and that's going to give us our range of what that answer could be. So this can work with percentages. It can also work with just numbers like 12,000 or 1,200, anything like that. Really what you're going to do is you're just going to take whatever your margin of error is and whatever it's being applied to, and you're going to add it, right? So in this case it's 2%, so we add it to 60, and you're also going to subtract it to 60, and that is going to give you your 62% to 58% of city residents that approve eliminating overnight parking. So between 58% and 62% of city residents approve eliminating overnight parking. So margin of error is something you need to have in your notes, and you need to understand that you're going to add it and subtract it to get your range of what's accurate from that data. So I'm going to go over why A through C are wrong real quick as well. We have A, exactly 60% of city residents approve eliminating overnight parking. That's incorrect. It isn't exactly 60% because we have that 2% margin of error, which means it could be anywhere from 58% to 62%. That's what the real number could be. The real number could be anywhere from 58% to 62%. So that's why A is incorrect. B, there are 72,000 city residents who approve eliminating overnight parking. This one, so I will have to get my calculator out for this one if I really wanted to. Well, actually I don't need to, because I can actually say that it's wrong right off the bat, because it says that there are exactly, by saying just there are, it's insinuating that it's exactly 72,000 city residents who approve eliminating overnight parking. That is incorrect as well, because it has to be a range, right? And you'll see this probably on a problem we go over later on in one of these practice tests. is that there's going to have to be a range. Since there's a margin of error of 2%, we'd have to take this 120,000 residents and we'd have to multiply it by 0.58 and then also multiply it by 0.62 to determine our range. Right, that would give us our range for how many residents would support this policy. It's not going to be exactly 72,000. And then C, about 2% of the city residents do not approve eliminating overnight parking. That's incorrect. This 2% is our margin of error. It does not talk about city residents not approving eliminating overnight parking. All right, so that takes us through our math section for today. So now we are going to switch over to the reading section for today. Okay, so for the reading section for today, we're going to spend about half a minute with the reading section. So we're going to do 15 minutes with a passage from SAT Practice Test 1, so this will be questions 1 through 10. And then we're going to do a second passage from SAT Practice Test 1. As I go through both of them, I'll read the passage and then take you through the questions and try to give you the insights that I have into the test. So any tips, tricks, strategies, anything like that that I can give to you, I'll tell you to put in your notebook. And then there's not really any work like there is for the math section, so I'll just kind of take you through and try to give you notes for your notebook as I go through this. So if you want, you can print off this practice test. I'll link it in the description. That's not necessarily necessary because that could take probably 15 minutes and you'll probably be good from just watching the screen and seeing what I do. So just make sure you have your notebook out. For the reading section, there's not really going to be a ton that you can put in your workbook. It's really just going to mostly be a lot of notes. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through how I would read this this passage. I'm not going to do it in the same amount of time I would normally do it. So normally I would complete this in about 10 minutes. I'm going to take about 15 minutes per passage just to give you more insights, right? Now, a couple weeks from now, probably like 2 or 3 weeks from now, I'll give you a full walkthrough of how I would go through it. And in that one, I'll be doing it as fast as I would normally do it. So that would be about 9 or 10 minutes per passage. But for today, I'm going to keep it slow so I can give you all of the insights and tricks that you'll need to know. So we're going to keep a slowed down version for today. All right, so I'm going to start reading. This passage is from Lydia Minotoa. So one thing that I want to note is we want to pay attention to this right here, right? And keep in mind that as I read through this, it's going to take me more than the 3 or 5 minutes I recommend just because I'm giving you insights into what to look for. So this isn't meant to be a pacing video in any sort of fashion. This is really just giving you the tips and tricks in a slowed down version for today. All right, so this right here. We want to make sure we pay attention to this. We're going to want to read this. We don't want to just jump into the passage. We want to read this up here. So I'm going to show you what I look for as I read through this. All right, so we have the author's name. I don't really care about that so much. That's really kind of unimportant to me. I want to pay attention to the title. So the title is The Strangeness of Beauty. All right, so that's suggesting to me that this is going to be my literature passage. Next thing I want to pay attention to is the year it was written. So they give you the copyright, so that's not necessarily the year it was written, right? So the copyright is 1999, so that's when it was published. It was published by the author, Lydia Minotoa. The setting is in Japan in 1920. See, so that's what we want to pay attention to there. So we know it's 1920 is the setting, not 1999. That's the copyright. This is the year that it's set in. It's set in Japan. We know that we have Chi and her daughter Naomi. They are members of the House of Fuji, which is a royal or a noble family, right? So we know then that Naomi and Chi are high up in Japanese culture, right? In their social class. They're a high social class. They are a noble family. So they might be involved in the government somehow. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and get going in the passage. All right. So with the reading through the passage, I'll pretty much just be doing it as a read through as I would for the most part. I don't anticipate me stopping much along the way to give insights because I don't really recommend trying to take away many massive ideas or take notes as we read through. So I'll go ahead and start. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form, had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, would she have been more receptive? He came on a winter's eve. He pounded on the door while a cold rain beat on the shuttered veranda. So at first she thought him only the wind. The maid knew better. She heard her soft scuttling footsteps, the creak of the door, then the maid brought a calling card to the drawing room for Chi. She was reluctant to go to her guest. Perhaps she was feeling too cozy. She and Naomi were reading at a low table set atop a charcoal brazier. A thick quilt spread over the sides of the table so their legs were tucked inside with the heat. Who is it at this hour in this weather? She responded as she picked the name card off the maid's lacquer tray. Shinoda Akira Kobe Dental College, she read. Naomi recognized the name. Chi heard a soft intake of air. I think you should go, said Naomi. Akira was waiting in the entry. He was in the early 20s, slim, serious, wearing the black military-style uniform of a student. As he bowed, his hands hanging straight down, a black cap in one, a yellow oil paper umbrella in the other, Chi glanced beyond him. In the glistening surface of the courtyard's rain-drenched paving stones, she saw his reflection like a dark double. Madame, said Akira, forgive my disruption, but I come with a matter of urgency. His voice was soft, refined. He straightened and stole a deferential peek at her face, and in the dim light his eyes shone with sincerity. Chi felt herself starting to like him. Come inside, get out of this nasty night. Surely your business can wait for a moment or two. I don't want to trouble you. Normally I would approach you more properly, but I've received word of a position. I've had an opportunity to go to America as a dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. Congratulations, Chi said with amusement. That is an opportunity, I'm sure, but how am I involved? Even noting Naomi's breathless reaction to the name card, she had no idea. Akira's message, delivered like a formal speech, filled her with maternal amusement. You know how children speak so earnestly, so hurriedly, so endearingly about things that have no importance in an adult's mind. That's how she viewed him, as a child. It was how she viewed Naomi, even though Naomi was 18 and training endlessly in the arts to make a good marriage. And the arts needed to make a good marriage. She had made no effort to find her a husband. Akira blushed. Depending on your response, I may stay in Japan. I've come to ask for Naomi's hand. Suddenly Chi felt the dampness of the night. Does Naomi know anything of your ambitions? We have an understanding. Please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of this proposal. I ask directly because the use of a go-between takes much time. Either method comes down to the same thing, a matter of parental approval. If you give your consent, I become Naomi's Yoshi. Okay, if I see a star, I'm pausing in my reading because if I see a star, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where that star is because it's going to explain what that term is, right? Sometimes you'll see a 1 or a 2 as well. That 1 will correspond to what it is. So if I go down here, I have that star. That is a man who marries a woman of higher status and takes her family's name, right? So we can infer from that Akira is of a lower social class than Naomi is, and that he would take on her family name in the marriage if the parents give approval. All right, so back to the passage. We'll live in the house of Fuji. Without your consent, I must go to America to secure a new home for my bride. Eager to make his point, he'd been looking her full in the face. Abruptly, his voice turned gentle. I see I've startled you. My humble apologies. I'll take no more of your evening. My address is on your card. If you don't wish to contact me, I'll reapproach you in 2 weeks' time. Until then, good night. He bowed and left, taking her ease with effortless grace like a cat making off with a fish. Mother, Chi heard Naomi's low voice and turned to the door. He has asked you? The sight of Naomi's clear eyes, her dark brows gave Chi strength. Maybe his hopes were preposterous. Where did you meet such a fellow? Imagine, he thinks he can marry the Fuji heir and take her to America all in the snap of the fingers? Chi waited for Naomi's ripe laughter. Naomi was silent. She stood a full half-minute, looking straight into Chi's eyes. Finally, she spoke. I met him at my literary meeting. Naomi turned to go back into the house, then stopped. Mother? Yes, I mean to have him. All right, so what I highlighted through there is what I would underline. Obviously, I can't really underline too well with the pen that I'm using because it's really thick, and you can't use a highlighter on the test. But basically what I highlighted is what I would be underlining as I read through. And as you noticed, as I highlighted, I didn't stop reading, I just kept going through. So everything that I highlighted was basically things that I saw that were important to the story. So go ahead and put that back, right? Get rid of the underline. All right, so now we are going to get into the questions. So any tips I have, put in your notes. Number 1, which choice best describes what happens in the passage? Okay, this is a big picture question. So this is a big picture main theme question, right? What happens in the passage? What's best describing it? Well, if we think about what happens in the passage, we have one character showing up at the doorstep in the middle of the rain, in the middle of a storm, and asking the parents of the daughter that he wants to marry for their approval, right? So this is really surprising because A, it doesn't sound like the parents know this Akira, and it doesn't sound like this is the normal way that they ask for a hand in marriage in 1920s Japan. So if I look at my answer choices after I came up with my own, so that's a tip you should put in your notes. Make sure we come up with our own answer choice before we look at the answer choices. All right, so our answer choice is that one character is surprising the other by coming in, and we know this because it's storming and it's a surprise. It doesn't sound like she knows Akira very well at all, right? So that's really our main description of what happened. So we have A, one character argues with another character who intrudes her home. He's not intruding, he was invited in. B, one character receives a surprising request from another character. That is true. We have one character being the mother receiving a surprising request from her daughter's suitor, right? Her daughter's boyfriend who's asking for her hand in marriage. C, one character reminisces about choices she has made over the years. That doesn't happen, so that's an unrelated wrong answer choice. D, one character criticized another character for pursuing an unexpected course of action. Really, this would be if we narrowed in too much on that end part, right? This last part here, right? We would be focusing too narrowly on this sentence right here where she criticizes him or kind of jokes at him. So that's not taking into account the big picture. So this is a big picture question, so we want to make sure we're answering with the big picture, which is answer choice B. This answer choice D is too narrow. We'd be focusing too much on lines 85 to 88, or 84 to 86. All right, question 2. Which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? So this is basically just how is the passage developed, right? So if we're thinking about how our passage is developed, what it really is it's just telling us what happened, right, in detail of this this encounter between someone who wants to marry this young daughter of this royal family, right, this noble family. So we're really just detailing what happened. So we're just kind of detailing what happened. So we have A, careful analysis of a traditional practice. No, we're not carefully analyzing the practice of asking for the hand in marriage, right? We have B, a detailed depiction of a meaningful encounter. Yes, we are in detail, right? We have dialogue, we have things about them being by the fireplace. We are describing in detail a meaningful encounter where a young man is asking the parents of the woman he wants to marry for her hand in marriage. C, we have a definitive response to a series of questions. We don't get a definite response, actually. He says that it'll be 2 weeks' time when he comes back, so we don't get a definitive response. D, a cheerful recounting of an amusing anecdote. Well, this isn't really cheerful, right? The mood here is not cheerful. The mood here is sudden, it's abrupt, and it's kind of a little chaotic, just a little bit, but it's definitely not cheerful. All right, so things to put in your notes for 2, I would just say, and we might end up only getting through one passage today now that I'm looking at the time, and that's okay. I kind of want to cover this more in depth since we're in the beginning stages of prepping for the SAT reading section. So I'm going to slow down. We're only going to cover one passage today because I want to cover these question topics in depth and give you more things to put in your notes. All right, so as far as notes for number 2 that I would take, once again, making sure, look at how I'm getting rid of these wrong answer choices, right? I talked about this last week and I'm talking about it again right now. We really have to be ruthless in how we're getting rid of these answer choices. Notice how I got rid of D just because it had cheerful. Just because it had cheerful, it was wrong because this isn't a cheerful recounting, right? Are we recounting something? Yes, kind of, right? We're not really recalling it in the sense that it's a memory, but we are describing something, but I had to get rid of it because of cheerful, right? Up here, I had to get rid of it because of definitive, right? Because we don't get a definitive answer. Up here, a careful analysis of a traditional practice. We're not analyzing that practice. Notice how ruthless I am. One word and it's done. I'm not letting anything slide. One word is incorrect in a wrong answer choice and it's out. I'm not picking it. Period. End of story. You have to be ruthless in how you're getting rid of these wrong answer choices. And the other thing too is that's going to help you go a lot faster because you see one word that's wrong, you know it's wrong. All right. So now that I'm a little bit more calm after explaining that, we've got number 3. As used in line 1 and line 65, directly most nearly means. Okay, anytime that I'm asked what a word means in lines, I'm going to those lines no matter what. So put that in your notes. I believe I already told you to do that when I talked about things last week, but I'm going to say it again now because it's very, very important. Make sure if you're told anything about lines, go back to them, okay? And anytime you're asked a most nearly means question, come up with your own answer choice before you look at the answer choices. Don't look at A through D yet. You're going to take the word directly, go to lines 1 and 65, and come up with your own meaning of what that most nearly means. So we're going to go to line 1, find directly. We have Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to go to speak to his father to approach a go-between, would she have been more receptive? Okay, the word here that I'm looking at is go-between, right? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between. So him coming directly means he's not using that go-between, right? So he's not using a mediator, right? So the word that I would be looking for there would be, it's tough to come up with one for that one. So I'm really just going to note in my head, go to line 65, that I'm looking for something where there's no mediation. There's no one in between. He's going straight to that person. So now in 65, I'll see if I can come up with an exact word for it. So we've got, we have an understanding. Please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of my proposal. I ask directly because the use of a go-between, once again, the use of a go-between, he's coming directly, right? So straight to her takes much time, right? All right, so directly, this one's tough to come up with a word for on its own without looking at the answer choices, but we can pretty much say that directly is going to be something saying that there's no one in between, so no mediation. So in this case, it actually is two words, which is why it was tough to come up with one. It is without mediation, no go-between, right? A mediator is someone who is in between two people, right? So if I have a stick figure here and a stick figure here and a stick figure here, this is the mediator, right? So in this case, he's skipping that mediator, so without mediation. Right, so our answer for 3 is C. So that explains why it was tough for me to come up with that one word, because the correct answer here was actually 2 words. Right, it's not going to be frankly, right, because frankly doesn't have anything to do with a mediator. So we can get rid of A. B, confidently? No, because we're not talking about his emotions. C, without mediation? Yes, because we don't have a mediator. D, with precision? No, right? Why is it not with precision? Because precision doesn't mention anything about that go-between, and that's what the whole thing of directly was about. The whole point of including this word directly was to show that he did not use that traditional go-between. Okay, so things to put in your notes for 3. Like I said, anytime we're directed to a line, we go to that line. Next thing, anytime that we have a most nearly means question, or really any question at all for the most part, except for questions where it's about inferences. Inferences, you can't go back to the text because you're asked to infer, and I'll cover that more with the 2 passages at once when we get into those types of passages. But really, for most questions other than inference questions, we're going to want to go back to the text and come up with our own answer first. So, big things to put in your notes, making sure we're going back to the text when we're asked to refer to lines, coming up with our own answer choice first for most nearly means questions. Those are going to be your 2 big things. All right, question 4. Which reaction does Akira most fear from Chi? All right, Akira, that's the guy who is asking Chi's daughter to Naomi. He's asking Naomi to marry her, but he's asking Chi for her approval. So which reaction does he most fear? Well, you would think if you didn't read the passage and you just skipped over it, you would just think he's afraid of getting denied. But no, that isn't what he's most afraid of. What he's most afraid of is he's most afraid of his proposal being inappropriate. Because if we go back and we look at basically what happens, he says, and I'm guessing the next question to that is an evidence one. Yes, it is. Okay. So I'll go ahead and find you the evidence for this as well. Right? So he's really afraid that she's going to view it as inappropriate. So if we go through and we look at where he says, let me find where this is. He says not to confuse basically his hurriedness with a lack of thinking. I probably highlighted it. I gotta find it. Where is it? All right, let me look real quick and see if I can figure out. Okay, I think it's about 60s. All right, so it is, where is this? Please don't judge. Okay, here it is, right here. Please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of this proposal, right? When he says that, when he says, please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of this proposal, I ask directly because the use of a go-between takes much time. Okay. When he says, please don't judge my candidacy by the unseemliness of my proposal, he's basically saying that he's fearing that they won't think that he's serious about this because he didn't take the proper and traditional way. So my evidence is going to be 63 to 64. So that's going to be C. And look at that. Look at how I found my evidence first. If you really think about it, that's kind of what you should be answering questions like that with. So as far as which reaction he most fears, that's going to have to be answer choice A. She will consider his proposal inappropriate, right? He's afraid since he didn't take the traditional route, she's going to consider it inappropriate. B, she will mistake his earnestness for immaturity. No, that's a stretch, right? He's more worried about her taking it as inappropriate. We don't really touch upon maturity. And he's not really thinking that she's going to mistake his earnestness for immaturity. He never touches on immaturity. He's really just worried that she will think that since he's not taking the traditional route that it's inappropriate. All right, notice once again, one word was incorrect. I got rid of that answer choice. I'm really trying to show you how important that is. C, she will consider his unscheduled visit an imposition. No, he's not worried about that. When he shows up, he never says that he's worried about imposing or anything. Nothing like that at all. Once again, look at that. One word. See, I'm not even trying to do this. This is just how my mind works after taking so many practice tests and getting so good at recognizing how to get rid of answer choices that I can just get rid of them on one word. And that's what you have to do. You have to get rid of them on one word because otherwise you're going to get stuck between two. All right, D, she will underestimate the sincerity of his emotions. No, that is incorrect. Why? Well, he doesn't fear her underestimating the sincerity of his emotions, okay? The big part here is that his emotions, he knows that they're sincere, and he thinks that she will see them as sincere. He's just worried that she will think that it's inappropriate because he's not taking the traditional path. So once again, getting rid of D because he's not worried about it being coming across as insincere. He's worried about it coming across as inappropriate. So even that slight difference makes this answer choice wrong. All right. And then question 5, we already got that one because we want to get that evidence first. All right, now we got question 6. In the passage, Akira addresses Chi with what? Well, if we go back and we think about the text as a whole, and we're not directed to lines, so it's not like we can just go to lines, but if we're just kind of looking at what I highlighted, let's look at right here, right? Without your consent, I must go to America to secure a home for my bride. What does that mean? Well, that means that even if she doesn't give him approval, he still intends on marrying her. So as far as his reaction, if we go down here, or Akira addressing Chi, he's addressing her with respect, yes, because he's asking for her permission to marry her daughter, but he's not completely deferring to her because he still intends to marry Chi's daughter if he gets denied approval. So he's not deferring, he's not utter deference, and he is still respectful. So D would be our answer there, and I'm going to show you why the other answer choices are wrong. A, affection but not genuine love. There's nothing that shows that he doesn't love Chi, right? He addresses Chi with affection. That's not even necessarily true. He isn't really affectionate to Chi, and we don't really talk about his love with Chi. This is really just kind of a formal asking of permission for her daughter's hand in marriage. And then we have B, objectivity but not incomplete impartiality. Well, obviously he isn't objective because he's in love with Chi's daughter. So this isn't really a terrible word choice here. And then also not complete impartiality. It's kind of like obviously he's not impartial. So once again, we can get rid of B. All right, and then C, amusement but not mocking disparagement. This dude is not amused. All right, Akira is not here for jokes and he's not mocking anyone. We can get rid of C. All right, question 7. Question 7. The main purpose of the first paragraph is what? Okay, this is going to be what we call a little detail or a small detail purpose question. So a little detail purpose question. Okay, so what happens? We got to go back to that first paragraph, okay? If it directs us to a paragraph, that's just as good as directing us to lines, and we're going to want to go back to them. Now, I understand that at this point you're probably thinking, wow, this guy's approaching half an hour on one passage. Keep in mind, I can get this done in 9 minutes. I'm just trying to give you stuff to put in your notes so you can get better at this for later on. Right now, we're worrying about accuracy. We're going to worry about pacing later, and I'll show you how we can do this super fast later, but right now I want you to have time to really understand things and put them in your notes. All right, so the main purpose of the first paragraph, once again, we want to make sure we're going back to the text, right? If we're given a paragraph that's just as good as lines, we want to go back to it. All right, so we have Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, would she have been more receptive? All right, well, what this is basically saying, as far as what the big purpose of putting that in, if we go back down, where is it? All right, so the main purpose. Well, based on that, the main purpose is really talking about the reaction, right? Because we talk about how he wonders if she would have been more receptive. So that's talking about her reaction. And I'll go ahead and go back up so you can see that. Okay, I'm going to use a highlighter here. So we're really talking about her reaction, right? He came directly, but had he followed form, had he asked his mother to speak to a father, approach a go-between, would she have been more receptive? So we're really talking about her response here, right? So we're kind of analyzing Chi's response to Akira asking. So let's go back down, and we see that that is an answer choice D. That will be our correct answer choice for 7. We know that the main purpose then of the first paragraph is we're analyzing Chi's reaction, because we talk about how she reacted and how she may have reacted differently if something else had taken place. All right, so we are not describing a culture, even though we can make inferences about the culture. The key part that makes this one wrong is the describe part. If we said that we can make inferences about a culture or passively learn about a culture or something like that, then that maybe could be correct. But since it's describe and not infer, we have to get rid of A. B, criticize a tradition. Okay, here's the problem with criticize. Criticize is a value word, right? We aren't criticizing a tradition. We aren't making a value judgment on whether a tradition is good or bad. We're not necessarily describing it. We are just simply, it simply is implemented in the story, right? That doesn't mean that we are describing it, and it doesn't mean that the main purpose is to criticize it. So we can get rid of those two. Questioning a suggestion. There isn't really a suggestion, so we can get rid of it on that. We're also not questioning anything. C is just a bad answer choice all around. All right, question 8. Question 8, as used in line 2, form most nearly means. Well, we're going to go to line 2, find form, and come up with what it most nearly means. Had he followed form, right away I'm thinking tradition with that one. So tradition or customs is immediately what I'm thinking on that. Had he followed form, we're really talking about had he followed tradition or custom. Tradition isn't on there, custom is. Custom will be our answer there. Appearance, nope. We're not talking about looks or anything like that. Had he followed structure, structure isn't a good word for that. Structure would be kind of building, stuff like that. I don't like that word at all. Nature, had he followed nature? No, not even close. Nature would be if we're talking about ecology, things like that, or human nature. Here we're talking about something societal, not nature. Right, so custom, that is societal. So our answer there is B. Why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency? Okay, this is going to be line 32. All right, once again, right here, even though line 32 is just telling us where this is said, that's also telling us where our answer lies. Okay, and look at that. In our next one, we're asked for evidence. Notice how none of them come before line 32. Okay, that's for a reason. Because if it says line 32 here, A, that's only telling us where this takes place. So if you didn't know that, put that in your notes, that if you have a quote followed by something like this, that's just telling you where this quote takes place. So put that in your notes. But as far as why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency, well, you might be able to remember this without even going back, but you need evidence anyway, so we might as well go back. We can recall, and I probably highlighted this, that he got a job offer in America. See right here. I've had opportunity to go to America as a dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. So we've got, normally I would approach it more properly, but I've received word of a position. I've had an opportunity to go to America as a dentist. So I'm looking at 41 to 42, or I'm looking at 39 to 42. So let's see what I have. I've got 39 to 42, so that'll be my answer there. Okay, so as far as what we have learned that you should have in your notes from this. Oh, and we gotta go back here and answer this. So why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency? He has been offered an attractive job in another country. So that's answer choice C. So once again, big thing here, look at how I'm always getting evidence, right? Always looking for evidence to support my answers. That's huge with the SAT reading section. Especially with questions where you're asked for evidence after, you might as well go ahead and find the evidence before you answer this question here. Right? Because if you go and find the evidence first, you know your answer is going to be right. Whereas if you pick a question, you pick your choice here, and then you look for evidence, well, that's not really a good strategy, because you should have evidence supporting your answer choice before you pick it. Even for questions where you're not asked to offer evidence, you should have evidence for it, because it has to have evidence in the text in order to be correct. So, big things you should have in your notes from today. Making sure that we always find evidence for our questions. Okay, if it's an evidence question that's paired to one like this, like 9 and 10 is, where you have to provide evidence for the previous question, go ahead and find your evidence first. That's an incredible strategy that I would highly recommend doing. Finding your evidence, so you read the question, right? I'd read this question. I would go and I would find my evidence to formulate my own answer first, okay? I really like it when people make their own answers first on the SAT, because it helps them to not get swayed by wrong answer choices that might be half right or partly right or 90% right, but there's one word that make it wrong. Okay, so big things you should have in your notes: coming up with our own answer first. Okay, in questions like this, finding our evidence first, then coming up with our own answer. In questions where it's most nearly means, with words like that, going back to our lines. So anytime that we are given lines, we want to go back to those lines. Anything, let's see what else I can give you to put in your notes. You should have in your notes main purpose, right? Small detail purpose, so understanding that if we're asked for the purpose of one small section, that's a small detail purpose question. We're having to implement what the purpose is of that paragraph or those lines in the context of the big picture idea as a whole. All right, and then let's look at some other question types that we want to understand. Okay, other big thing that I talked about earlier on was getting rid of wrong answer choices as soon as we know that they're wrong. Okay, so one word making the whole answer choice wrong. I really talked about that in question 2 here, and I think that that should really go in your notes. How ruthless we have to be with getting rid of wrong answer choices. That's huge for the SAT reading section, is getting rid of those wrong answer choices as soon as we can. So one word makes the whole thing wrong, understanding that. As far as any other things that you should have in your notes, I'd say that's about it. You should probably have been taking notes as I was talking. I kind of expected you to. If not, just make sure that you kind of put in a summary of the notes that you remember from what I just said. So once again, that took us 30 minutes to go through one passage. Keep in mind, I could have done that in 9 or 10 minutes. And if you go and look at my reading answer explanation videos, I do them in about 12 minutes or whatever. Like I said, it's really just a matter of I wanted to show you what to look for on the SAT reading section today. I wasn't concerned with my pace because I wanted to tell you what to look for, right? If I would have just gone through super fast, I wouldn't have been able to give you as much insight, and that's what I want to do for the next week. So the next week, I'm going to be taking it slow with the reading sections to give you more insight into what to look for and what to do. And then once you have a better idea of what to do and those insights, then in a couple weeks, that's when I'm going to start getting into how you can move really, really fast and get correct answer choices very, very quickly. But for now, I want you to be able to understand how we can get to the correct answer choice first. So for the next week or 2 or 3 weeks, it's really going to be about accuracy. And then after that, we're going to get into pacing. So we're going to start with getting very accurate, and then we're going to get very fast. And that's how we're going to get very, very, very good at the SAT reading section. So make sure to like, subscribe, and share. There will be a donation link in the description when it's up and running. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.